Hello. First of all, I'd like to thank Nancy and Maria for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful event. Very honored to be here. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about what this piece, Face on the Barroom Floor, means to me and why it's so important to me personally. I would literally not be here if it were not for this opera. Now, that sounds like an exaggeration, but let me explain why. When I went to school, oh good, it's coming out. People were writing mostly music in what they call the 12-tone style. Is anybody familiar with that? Yeah, it's very dissonant, and I like some of it myself, but it takes training to get to appreciate it. And I was not a person who wanted to do that. If you didn't do 12-tone music when I went to school, you probably would be writing avant-garde music, which is Stockhausen and John Cage, etc. Now, there were a few of us, actually quite a few, who felt we still wanted to write music with tonality, with melody, etc., that sort of was a part of the tradition of the past. And we had to sort of hide. We were sort of like, quote, in the closet as composers, because everyone would tell us, you know, you really should try to develop a style that's more current, you know. What you're writing is not appropriate at this time in history. And a lot of us just couldn't do it, so I just didn't want to do that. So it stifled me to the extent that I really, literally could not write at a certain point because I was trying to make my style more popular, not popular, more current and more dissonant. But it wasn't for me, it wasn't inside me to do that. So at some point I realized, it was when I moved to New York City. I was lucky to get a job with the New York City Opera and learned so much about opera, more then than I learned in all of my years of education. And so during that time I realized I really wasn't going to be a classical composer. And an amazing magical thing happened. Tonality came back, and no one would have expected it. But somebody must have said at some point, who are we writing this music for? We don't have an audience. I mean, really. and so some composers decided, well, let's go back and see what tonality would be like now, in hindsight, and using some of the stuff that we did over the centuries, in the early 20th century and before. And it turned out that there were composers like David Del Tredici and a few others who developed a style called the New Romanticism. There were other composers who were kind of coming out of the closet. Philip Glass and people like Steve Reich were writing music with tonality. And so I realized, wait a minute, maybe I can be a classical composer. So through my contacts at New York City Opera, I was able to convince Central City Opera in Colorado to give me a small commission to write a short 25-minute opera based on anything to do with the Central City, Colorado subject. Now, the reason Central City is important is that it is the area where they have the Central City Opera, which is a very fine summer company. They had a new director who liked to take chances. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. But as I said, he liked to take chances, so he commissioned me to do this. And we wrote the thing in about 3 months because my librettist, John Bowman, and I were kind of given the word at the last minute, okay, you could go ahead and do it. So I said, oh, this is going to be fun. I can write whatever I want to now. Now, I was in Los Angeles at this point because I decided, since I couldn't be a classical composer, I'm going to try to become a film composer and TV, because you can write in different styles, and I would enjoy that. So here I am in Los Angeles, getting a little disenchanted with the film industry and getting a commission to write an opera, and tonality came back. So it was a very exciting moment for me. So I just instantly went ahead and wrote the piece, and when it was done, the first summer at Central City, it played 32 summers at Central City, which is a good run. I was 5 the first time they did it there, so. Anyway, it went very, very well, and that first summer, it was so successful that they decided they were going to do it in seasons every summer. And there were several people who made the comment that this piece is so suitable to Central City because it's a the setting is here, the actual telehouse bar where the face is painted on the floor is here. it probably won't ever get done anywhere else because it's so localized. And to my great surprise, it got picked up, and in a couple of years, there were about 45 companies that did the piece. And I was just amazed. I was the most surprised person of all. And that started me back into classical music and being a serious, quote, serious composer. So it's very nostalgic for me to think of what this piece really means to me. You know, in a sense, composers today are a little bit of, let me use the word anachronism. And the reason I'm saying that is that in all times before our time, it was the music of the day that was played mostly. And now we have a wonderful repertoire that's developed over the centuries. And we have what we call the standard opera repertoire and the standard symphonic repertoire. And occasionally an opera company will do a new piece. Which reminds me, when I first decided I was going to do my first opera when I was in college, I went to the chair of the opera department and I said to him, you know, I'd like to write an opera. I was a sophomore, I think. And he said, well, you know, opera's a dead horse. And I said, well, really? And he said, well, you can go ahead and do it. You know, we'll probably try to get it performed here. So I wrote my first student opera then, but I'll never forget those words. And I'll tell you why I don't agree with him. Because, well, he's right about the fact that the standard opera repertoire is what really is done 99% of the time. Okay, I understand that. But I think the real American opera is something else. It's American musical theater, from Rodgers and Hammerstein down to Stephen Sondheim and beyond. Because a lot of these people are writing what they call crossover pieces, people that borrow, pieces that borrow from both traditions. And I like to think of The Face as a crossover piece because you'll hear why in a few seconds. It's a little bit, has popular elements in it, which I like to call vernacular elements of vernacular music. So you will hear barroom piano quite prominently, which gives it the feeling of the Wild West. And you will also hear a folk song. It sounds like a folk song. It's not really a folk song, but it's in that style. And at the end of the scene, a little bit before the end of the scene we're going to show you, there's an actual operatic trio, which I think was inspired by the trio from Vanessa by Samuel Barber, if anyone of you know that. It's a wonderful, wonderful work. So we'll show, there was a documentary made of this opera and Central City in general a couple of years ago. And fortunately, they did a wonderful video in the documentary of an actual performance of it. So we're going to play scene 2 of The Face on the Barroom Floor. And the story is pretty simple. The nice thing is we have super titles, so you'll be able to understand everything. But basically, in scene 2, what happens is that they decide they're going to paint a face on the floor because a tenor comes in, and he's sort of a vagabond type. It's not typecasting at all, by the way, but a tenor sort of stumbles in and orders drinks for everyone in the house, and he's, you know, an artist who still has his paints with him, and he's just kind of a messed up person. So he walks into the bar, and he's making a big commotion, and they try to keep him quiet. He buys drinks, and he says, all right, drinks on the house. And then when he has to pay, he said, well, I can't pay you in money, but I can pay you by painting a picture on the floor of the most beautiful woman I know. Happened to be the barmaid. And it turns out he had a relationship with her earlier, but she's now with the bartender. So, perfect chance for, you know, blood and guts to happen in opera. And it does. I won't say too much more, except that this scene takes place in the 1800s. First scene takes place in the present, and the last scene takes place in the present. So we're going to play scene 2 from The Face, and this is from the Central City Opera production that we did a couple of summers ago.